Imagine you are hungry. Not, I skipped breakfast hungry. Ancient hungry. Your group has a few baskets of grain, some bruised fruit, maybe a little honey if someone was brave enough or stupid enough to annoy bees. No fridge, no sealed plastic box, no clean kitchen counter, no tiny label saying, best before Tuesday. In the ancient world, food had one main hobby. It went bad. Fruit fell from trees, split open, softened, attracted insects, and started to smell strange. Grain got damp, honey mixed with water. Anything sweet became a party invitation for wild yeast. And at some point, one ancient human looked at food that was basically starting to rot and drank it. That sounds like the beginning of a medical emergency. But it may also be one of the oldest survival tricks humans ever kept. Because alcohol did not begin as a luxury. It began as a trade. You gave up a little control of your brain. In return, you got calories, warmth, courage, ritual, trust, and one very useful excuse to make nervous people sit together without immediately reaching for a spear. So when did ancient humans start drinking alcohol? Earlier than most people expect. Long before bars, long before bottles, long before anyone said, I only drink natural wine, while ruining a dinner conversation. Humans probably met alcohol first in overripe fruit, but they started controlling it much later, when they learned that fermentation was not just decay, it was decay with benefits. And that is the part people miss. Most people imagine alcohol came after civilization. First farming, then villages, then extra grain, then someone finally had enough free time to invent beer. Nice story. Too clean. The older story is messy. Alcohol did not wait for civilization to become comfortable. It showed up while humans were still living close to hunger, weather, predators, disease, strangers, death, and bad decisions made around firelight. Ancient humans did not drink because life was easy. They drank because life was hard, and alcohol made hard life easier to organize. The first alcohol humans ever tasted was almost certainly an accident. Not a recipe, not a brewery, not a genius with a clay cup saying, gentlemen, I have invented Saturday. It was fruit. Fruit is basically nature's soft trap. It grows sweet to attract animals. Animals eat it. Seeds travel. Everyone wins. Until the fruit falls, bruises, cracks, and sits in the sun. Then, yeast gets involved. Sugar turns into alcohol. The smell changes. The taste changes. The animal eating it changes too. Modern animals still do this. Elephants, monkeys, birds, bats, many animals eat fermented fruit when they find. Humans were not special because they discovered alcohol. They were special because they remembered. A hungry animal eats fermented fruit once. A human eats it, feels warm, feels strange, watches everyone laugh too loudly, then thinks, we should find more of that. That is the dangerous genius of humans. We do not just survive accidents. We turn them into tradition. At first, alcohol was probably not strong. No ancient hunter-gatherer was pouring double whiskey after a mammoth. This was light fermentation, soft fruit, sour-sweet liquid, a strange buzz, enough to notice, enough to remember. Enough to connect the dots. Sweet food changes if it sits. Wet grain changes. Honey water changes. And sometimes, the change is not useless. Sometimes, the change gives something back. That matters because ancient people could not afford to waste food. Today, if grapes look weird, people throw them away and complain that groceries are expensive. Ancient humans did not have that attitude. If food looked weird, the question was not, is this pretty? The question was, can this keep someone alive? Fermentation gave ancient humans a new answer. Fruit that was going bad could become a drink. Grain that was wet could become something filling. Honey mixed with water could turn into something powerful. Ancient people did not need chemistry to understand that. They had hunger. Hunger is a very strict teacher. But accidental alcohol is not the same as brewing. The real turning point came when humans stopped waiting for nature to make alcohol by accident and started helping it happen on purpose. That is where the story gets strange, because some of the oldest evidence for deliberate brewing does not come from a palace. It does not come from a city. It does not come from a rich king with too much grain and too much confidence. It comes from hunter-gatherers. At Rockafet Cave, in what is now Israel, researchers found evidence that Natufian people were making beer-like drinks around 13,000 years ago. Think about that. Not modern farmers. Not city people. Not people living in luxury. Hunter-gatherers, people still living very close to survival, and the brewing seems to have been connected with burial rituals. So, One of the earliest known beer-like drinks was not just it was tied to death. That tells us something important. Alcohol was never only about getting drunk. From very early on, it was about gathering. It was about memory. It was about ritual. It was about making the group feel like one body, especially when one of its members was gone. And this is where the simple version of history starts to crack. We like to imagine ancient humans as practical in a boring way. Food, fire, shelter, hunting. Very serious people doing very serious survival. But survival is not only meat and shelter. Survival is also keeping the group from falling apart. A dead hunter is not just a dead hunter. It is grief. It is fear. It is children asking where someone went. It is adults wondering who hunts tomorrow. It is the group staring at death and needing a way to continue. A shared drink gives grief a shape. Stand here. Drink this. Remember this person. Then survive tomorrow. That is not decoration. That is emotional survival. And ancient humans needed emotional survival as badly as they needed calories. Because a group that cannot handle fear breaks. A group that cannot handle death breaks. A group that cannot sit together after loss does not stay a group for long. So when we ask, when did ancient humans start drinking alcohol? The answer is not only a date, it is a prop. They started when alcohol became useful enough to risk. And yes, alcohol was risky. It made people less alert. It slowed reaction time. It could cause fights. It could make someone say something stupid beside a fire, which is still one of alcohol's main traditions. In the ancient world, that risk was serious. There were predators. There were rival groups. There were cliffs, rivers, sharp tools, and no emergency. Being drunk in the wrong place could get you killed. So why keep it? Because ancient survival was never about avoiding every risk. It was about choosing the risk that gave the group something back. And alcohol gave back a lot. Calories, warmth, a way to preserve value, a way to mark rituals, a way to make strangers less dangerous, a way to reward labor, a way to turn food into cooperation. That last part may be the biggest, because the most dangerous animal near an ancient camp was not always the wolf. Sometimes it was another human. Imagine a stranger arriving near your camp. He has a spear. You have food. Nobody knows if this is trade, marriage, alliance, or robbery with extra steps. Everyone is watching hands. Everyone is counting people. Everyone is pretending to be calm in the very ancient human way, which means standing near weapons. Now put fermented drink in the middle. It does not magically create peace. Alcohol is not a fairy godmother, but it changes the room before humans even had rooms. It lowers tension. It gives people something to share. It creates a small ritual. Drink first, talk after, sit closer, laugh once, show you are not attacked. In a world without contracts, police, passports, or customer service departments to ignore you professionally, shared rituals matter. Alcohol helped make those rituals stronger, not because ancient people were silly, because trust was survival technology. A lone human is meat with opinions. A group is power, but groups are hard. People get jealous. People lie. People panic. People want status. People steal food. People remember insults for 20 years because apparently that part of the brain evolved very early. So humans needed tools to hold groups together. Fire helped. Stories helped. Ritual helped. Food sharing helped. Alcohol joined that tool. It made gatherings feel different from ordinary life. It marked special moments. It softened the edge between strangers. It turned you and me into us, at least for one night. That is not a small thing. For ancient humans, us was the line between life and death. Then there is the grain problem. Grain is not exciting. Nobody sees a pile of seeds and thinks, ah yes, night. But grain changed everything. It could be stored, it could be counted, it could be planted. It could feed more people. And if it got wet and fermented, it could become beer-like drink. This is where one of the most annoying ideas in neat history appears. Beer may have come before bread. That does not mean every archaeologist agrees on every detail. It means the old, clean order first bread, then beer, then fun is too simple. Humans were experimenting with grain in more than one way. They were grinding it, soaking it, heating it, storing, letting it change. Bread fed the body. Beer could feed the group. That is the difference. A flat piece of bread is useful, but a batch of fermented drink creates an event. People gather for it. They wait for it. They plan around it. They share it. They remember who brought it. They remember who controlled. And once people start gathering around something, that thing becomes more than food. It becomes social gravity. This is why alcohol matters so much in early human history. It pulls people together, sometimes for ritual, sometimes for trade, sometimes for marriage, sometimes for mourning, sometimes for work, sometimes because humans, after surviving another terrifying day on Earth, simply needed a reason to sit down and feel less hunted. That sounds small. It is not. Civilization is not built only from stone walls and crop fields. It is built from repeated gatherings, people coming back to the same place, at the same season, for the same ritual, with the same food, the same dead remembered, the same stories retold, the same drinks shared. That is how scattered people become a community. And alcohol fits perfectly into that pattern. At Jiahu, in ancient China, pottery residues show a fermented drink made with ingredients like rice, honey, and fruit around 9,000 years ago. That is not just someone finding a weird berry. That is a mixed fermented beverage, a recipe, a controlled tradition. Humans were not just stumbling into alcohol anymore. They were combining ingredients. They were storing it in vessels. They were building it into life. By then, alcohol had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer just nature's accident. It had become human culture. And once alcohol entered culture, it did what human tools always do. It spread. It changed. It picked up new jobs. In the South Caucasus, early winemaking appears thousands of years ago. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, beer became part of daily life. Labor, religion, and payment. Workers were given beer. Offerings included beer. Texts and images show beer as more than a party. It was food. It was ration. It was medicine carry. It was temple offering. It was wages. Basically, ancient HR discovered beer before email, which may be the only time HR improved history. This shift matters, because once alcohol becomes ration, it becomes control. Who controls the grain? Who controls the jars? Who controls the brewing? Who decides when the feast happens? Who gets a drink? Who gets more? Who gets none? That person does not only control alcohol, they control mood, labor, loyalty, attention. A cup can become a chain if the wrong person holds the jar. So alcohol moves from survival trick to social tool to power system. It starts with rotting fruit. Then it becomes ritual, then gathering, then payment, then politics. That is the human path. Give humans anything useful, and sooner or later, someone will use it to organize other humans. Fire cooks food. Then it marks camps. Then it becomes ceremony. Grain feeds people. Then it becomes tax. Alcohol warms the group. Then it becomes power. This does not mean alcohol was always good. Ancient humans were not magical, wise forest people who only drank responsibly under the moon. Alcohol caused problems then, too. It could make violence worse. It could waste food. It could weaken judgment. It could create dependence. It could turn celebration into disorder. Every tool has a shadow. A spear can hunt or murder. Fire can cook or burn the shelter down. Alcohol can bond a group or break one. The point is not that alcohol was harmless. The point is that it was useful enough to, and that tells us something honest about humans. We are not a species that only keeps safe things. We keep powerful things. Fire is dangerous. Dogs are dangerous. Boats are dangerous. Cities are dangerous. Agriculture itself is dangerous. It brings disease, inequality, hard labor, crop failure, and bosses. Very tragic invention, bosses. But humans kept agriculture because it gave something back. Alcohol was the same kind of trade. Dangerous, but useful. Risky, but memorable. Wasteful sometimes, but socially powerful. And in ancient life, socially powerful often meant survival power, because the group needed more than food. It needed rhythm. It needed trust. It needed courage. It needed ways to handle fear. It needed ways to turn strangers into allies. It needed ways to make death survivable for the living. Alcohol helped with all of that. Not perfectly, not cleanly, not like a modern health recommendation, because please do not take survival advice from a cave bear. But historically, it makes sense. People did not keep returning to alcohol for thousands of years because it was random. They kept it because it worked on problems that every human group had. Food going bad, water not always safe, pain, cold, fear, grief, strangers, labor, status, memory. The drink touched all of them. That is why asking, when did humans start drinking alcohol, is only half the story. The better question is, what kind of world makes alcohol worth inventing? The answer is The ancient world. A world where food spoiled fast. A world where water could betray. A world where pain had few medicines. A world where strangers could become in-laws or enemies. And sometimes the difference was one tense eve. A world where death was never far away. A world where the group had to keep believing in itself. Even when the ground was cold, the hunt failed, and someone did not come home. In that world, alcohol was not just escape. It was structure. It made moments feel marked. It made gatherings feel special. It made agreements feel warmer. It made grief feel shared. It made food last differently. It made ordinary people feel, for a short time, less afraid of the dark. And before anyone laughs at them, we still do this. Modern humans still use alcohol to mark transitions, weddings, funerals, deals, holidays, after work, before awkward family conversation. When people do not know what to say, they often offer a drink. That is not new behavior. That is ancient behavior wearing nicer shoes. The bottle changed. The brain did not. We still use alcohol as a social signal. Sit down. Stay longer. Relax. You are part of this circle. For ancient humans, that circle was not lifestyle. It was survival. So when did ancient humans start drinking alcohol? The first taste probably came far back. From fermented fruit. No date, no name, no inventor, just a hungry human, a strange smell, and a decision that probably made the afternoon more interesting. But deliberate brewing goes back at least around 13,000 years, with beer-like drinks among hunter-gatherers. By around 9,000 years ago, humans were clearly making mixed fermented beverages in pottery. After that, alcohol walks straight into farming, ritual, labor, medicine, trade, and power. Not because humans became civilized and then got bored, because alcohol was already useful before civilization looked civilized. It was older than the comfortable world where drinking became a weekend activity. Older than cities. Older than writing. Maybe older than bread as a central human obsession. And definitely older than the idea that alcohol is only for... Ancient humans did not drink because life was easy. They drank because life was hard. They drank because food spoiled, because grief needed ritual, because strangers needed softening, because workers needed reward, because groups needed reasons to gather, because courage sometimes had to be borrowed from a bowl, and because survival was never just about staying alive. It was about keeping the group together long enough to face tomorrow. Alcohol was risky, but ancient survival was never about avoiding it was about choosing the risk that gave something back. And alcohol gave back a lot. Calories, warmth, memory, ritual, trust, control, a reason to gather around the same fire, a way to turn fear into ceremony, a way to turn grain, fruit, honey, and time into something people would protect. So no, alcohol did not appear because civilization was already comfortable. It appeared because life was brutal, and humans needed more than food to survive. They needed the group. They needed belief. They needed rhythm. They needed a way to make the night feel smaller. And sometimes, that came in the form of a fermented drink, passed from hand to hand, while the dark waited outside the fire.